There's a book that I wrote about on the blog a while back called Little Bets. Little Bets. I highly recommend it if you haven't read it. It talks about how making little tiny bets on things and seeing how they work out is a really productive way to create great things. The book starts out talking about Chris Rock and how Chris Rock develops his comedy routines. And you see Chris Rock on these HBO specials that are an hour long, and every joke is a hit, and he's just got the crowd in stitches. The book kind of breaks down what he actually does, which it starts out with a yellow notepad at a comedy club with 10 people. I mean, this is a guy who's, internationally known, making millions. He starts out with 10 people and just a list of things he's working on. And he said 9 out of 10 of those things fail at the comedy club level. But the 1 out of 10 becomes a good idea. And he builds on that, and next time he goes back to the little comedy club and maybe has 2 ideas that work out. And over time, he'll vet and work on this project until it's so good and so tight that it's ready for the HBO special. The Curbside Chat is ready for the HBO special. Right? I've given that thing 180 plus times now. It's more theater at this point than it is like a technical presentation. Like I know the pauses, I know what to hit. I've just done it so many times, right? It's just automatic. That one had a similar vetting process. Because when I started out giving it, I would code in these places and 2 people would show up. And I'd go somewhere else and 4 people would show up. And so the first 25 times doing it were incredibly low risk scenarios. We're not going to have that benefit with this one. This one, Jim has me on the calendar to deliver it like half a dozen times in the next 3 months. That being said, I've been working on this project for about 1.5 years now. It's now become the infamous mobility report because we had dates it was going to come out. We took the entire outline in June and threw it away and started over from scratch. And I have spent probably the last 3 or 4 weeks refining that and working on that and writing. What you're going to see today is in presentation format. The presentation part is not done. So there are going to be slides where there's really good graphics. There's going to be slides where there's no graphics. Just imagine that they're there. That part you don't have to give me feedback on because I know it was the graphic. Yeah. Here's what we're going to do when we're done. I'm going to give this presentation as straight face, as if I don't know any of you. You're not, people I'm intimate with, and this is a crowd somewhere else. When we get done, Jim wanted to set this up as a parliamentary style debate. And the reason we chose that, and he suggested that, is because if you've ever seen Parliament, and what's the show called where they Questions in Parliament? Yeah, it's a little bit tense. They're not always kind. They speak with a nice, happy British accent, but they're not always kind to each other, right? There's some sharp barbs to them, and we're actually looking for the sharp barbs here. If I fail in front of all of you, and you fix that failure here, when I go out and give this in the real world with people where the stakes are higher and we're trying to give our message, it's going to be better. So here's what we're going to do when I'm done with this. We'll take a little break. We'll come back. We're going to have 2 teams. We're going to have Team Nate and Team Kristen. And with each team, what we want you to do is one person at a time, and the team leader's going to, will call on someone, who's going to stand up and give a 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 sentence critique. You're not going to talk for 2 minutes, but we want something quick and snappy, like this slide was absolutely ridiculous for these reasons. And then, if that is, Kevin is going to be basically our parliamentarian judge. If Kevin thinks that is a fair and thoughtful critique, he's going to award you 1 Mountain Dew. If he awards you a Mountain Dew, I get a quick rebuttal. I don't get to go on and on. I get 2, 3, 4 sentences. I get a quick rebuttal. And in Kevin's parliamentary view, if my rebuttal overwhelms your point, then I get that Mountain Dew. At the end of the day, we'll have basically 3 piles of Mountain Dew. Team Kristen, Team Nate, and me. Whoever has the most wins. Okay? So the idea is, if you're going to stand up and say, oh, that was really nice, and I think it's pretty, and, you know, it's a great, you're going to lose, right? You're not going to win. We want something that is going to really sharpen this thing and make it good. So take your notes, write things down. When we're done, if you want a copy, I intentionally did this one on Google Slides so we could share it with everybody. So when we're done, if you want a copy, email me. I will share the document with you so you can, look at it that way too. And of course, if something hits you in the next day or 2 or 5 or 10, email me as well.
Can we echo the other team?
Without a doubt. Yeah. There should be some here's and, like that kind of stuff like Parliament. Yeah, no doubt. Yeah, skullduggery. That's what we call it. Yeah. So, transportation in the next American city. Welcome, everybody. My name is Chuck Marohn. Today, when it comes to transportation, our cities have too many needs. We have repairs, we have congestion, we have safety, we have needs to invest in growth, and we just don't have enough money. We have too many demands, and this is where we're going to start the imagination. By the way, if you have a great picture of some millennials talking on cell phones, like standing around, or some elderly people doing some activity, I would love that. But we have too many demands. We have these shifting demands and not enough money. We have too many additional things that we need to do that really weren't part of our agenda before, but now become apparent, and we don't have enough money. What's the answer to this? Obviously, the answer is we need more money, right? If we just had more money, we could solve all these transportation problems that we have, and we could be a great America with a great transportation system. The problem is, when we look at something like the federal gas tax, which funds the vast majority of our transportation investments, it currently sits at 18.4%. This 18.4 cents. This was set in 1994. Since then, it's not been changed or raised. There's an argument that it should at least be adjusted for inflation so it doesn't lose its value or its purchasing power. If that were the case, today it would be 29.7 cents. If the gas tax had grown along with GDP, in other words, if the gas tax had continued to grow along with the growth of our economy, it'd actually be a little bit more, around 30.1 cents. If it had actually grown at the rate that traffic grew, traffic being probably the closest correlation to demand that we have today, it would be somewhere around 23 cents. So we're in this range of reasonable amount of gas tax and growth and increase. The problem is, when we look at the funding that we need, we look at the funding that organizations have said, here's how much money we need to be able to build the transportation system we're after, the number comes in far further. It comes in at almost 78 cents. Now this is a static number as well. It's a number that doesn't take into account the fact that as the number goes up, as the gas tax goes up, people drive less. And so I've seen estimates as high as $1.50 or $2 a gallon in a dynamic sense. If it's 70 cents, if it's $1.50, if it's $10, it might as well be $100, right? Because it's an unimaginable amount of money. It's not going to happen. The question we really have to ask ourselves as we ponder what the next American city is going to look like is this: if we don't have the money, what then? If we don't have the money to continue to build in the way we're building today, what do we do at that point? In order to answer that question, we have to understand how we got to this point. If you go back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, and look at the industrial city, these were not great places. Smoke, soot, overcrowding, disease, poverty, exploitation. There was a whole lot of problems with people rushing to the cities as part of the Industrial Revolution. Writers at the time, including Jacob Riis, journalist, one of the kind of yellow journalist muckrakers at the time, said this: the 19th century drift of population of cities is sending ever-increasing multitudes to crowd them. We know now that there's no way out. The system that was the evil offspring of public neglect and private greed has come to stay, a storm center forever of our civilization. There was a lot of lament at the time about how horrible these places had become for people to live, for people to work, for people to get along. As we're trying to fix this, our economy goes through this seismic shift that we had never experienced before, that being the Great Depression. The Great Depression hit us at a time of incredible optimism and really kind of sucked the wind out of a country that was just getting its legs underneath it. At the time, the former President Calvin Coolidge said in this haunting statement, "In other periods of depression, it's always been possible to see some things which were solid and upon which you could base hope. But as I look around about, I see nothing to give ground to hope." This is an incredibly desperate time. Not only did you have people unemployed, but you had people starving, you had people massively dislocated. This is an incredibly painful time for our country. We solved some of these problems in a temporary sense by the activity that took place in World War II. All of a sudden, we had to mobilize a population around fighting a war. We had to put people to work building munitions, we had to put people to work fighting, we had to put people to work supplying the troops. People had stuff to do, and our economy started to churn again. But there was this nagging thing in the back of our minds. We had been through the whole problems with the industrial city, we had been through the Depression, and people were firmly in belief that if this war ended, which we wanted it to end, but once it ended, we were going to be right back to where we were before. Paul Samuelson, Nobel Prize economist, one of the chief advisors to FDR, said, were the war that ends suddenly within the next 6 months, there would be ushered in the greatest period of unemployment and industrial dislocation which any economy has ever faced. This is a very real fear that people had at the time. Of course, the period of unemployment and dislocation didn't happen, did it? We did something completely different, right? We created what at that point was the next American city, the post-Depression American city. We started to do things differently. Here's the lesson we took from the industrialization of America, from fighting the Great Depression, and from winning World War II. Here's the lesson that we took as a culture, as a society. When we focus our efforts, we can accomplish a lot in a very short period of time. When we pool our resources, when we pool our knowledge, when we focus our efforts, we can get a lot done in a very short period of time. We can move mountains, we can fight wars, we can triumph over great enemies, we can create a better society when we focus our efforts. 2 presidents from 2 different parties embodied this ideal in actions that they took around this period of time. FDR, of course, as part of combating the Great Depression, initiated the Federal Housing Administration. Later gave birth to Freddie and Fannie. The idea here being, we want to help people be owners in American society. We want people to be able to get into homes. We're going to lower interest rates. We're going to back loans. We're going to minimize the amount of down payment you have to have, because we want people to be able to live in stable communities, healthy places, and we want them to be owners in this society. Eisenhower, of course, is the president who passed the Federal Highway Act, establishing the interstate highway system. The idea here being a system for defense, but also a system that would allow us to essentially spread out and colonize this land that we had for the benefit of Americans. We were going to create this new prosperity. This was all based around expanding opportunity, economic growth, and jobs. Again, under this newfound kind of cultural understanding that when we pool our resources and focus our efforts, we can accomplish a lot in a very short period of time. Efficiency is what it was all about. We can do things incredibly efficiently when we focus our efforts and pool our resources. In fact, when FDR signed the Federal Highway Act into law, his signing statement included this. At my direction, there's been underway a review of the interstate program's practices, including an examination of federal, state, and local responsibilities for planning, financing, and supervising the program. The idea here was if we were going to act efficiently, we had to make sure that our system ran efficiently. So we came up with, insert graphics in your mind, ideas for what lane width should be, what the proper width of shoulders should be, how we should design vertical curves and horizontal curves, how we should do clear areas, curb radiuses, sign spacing, speeds. We came up with all these things as a matter of making sure that our efficient system, if we were pooling our resources, we were going to build quality highways in a quality country, with standards that were uniform across the country to ensure this very high American standard that we were establishing. When we build things in this way, from the top down, we get efficiency. We can accomplish a lot in a very short period of time. What we give up when we prioritize efficiency is we give up the nuanced feedback. The idea that the further you get from the decision, the more nuanced and complex some of the interactions become. When we first began building this system, this is how we envisioned it. If you've ever driven across Nebraska, you know the amount of hubris involved in planning a system of this size, right? This is a massively huge undertaking. And in the 1950s, when this was put together, the idea that we would build this had to have seemed almost fantastical, right? Yet, in our system, the way we've gone about doing this, pooling our resources, focusing our efforts, creating standards, building incredibly efficiently, this is what this system looks like today. This is just the federal system. This doesn't count the state system, the county and regional systems, the local systems that have all been built as part of this effort. We have transformed America based on these, the idea that we wanted to combat the nastiness of the industrial city, made sure that our country never slipped back into depression, and that there would be jobs and growth and opportunity nationwide. As we went along through this program, there certainly have been times of crisis, times where we faced pivotal moments, times when the money just wasn't there to do everything we needed to do. In an affluent society, how do we respond to urgent problems? When we have an urgent problem and we're an affluent society, are we likely to sit and rethink our assumptions and explore alternatives? Or are we more likely to simply say, let's take our affluence and use that to solve this problem? We need more money, right? That's what we do. And we have a history in this country of solving our problems by spending more money on it, by throwing money at it, by saying we can get through this crisis if we just pool our resources and spend a little bit more to get it done. Here's the projections for the Federal Highway Trust Fund. We've been keeping it afloat through deficit spending for the last 4 years, borrowing money from the future to pay for projects today. As we continue out in the future, the cash flow just goes dramatically in the negative. Ernest Rutherford, British physicist, said, a quote that Winston Churchill quoted often, "We've run out of money, it's time to start thinking." We've gotten to the end of what we can do by brute force. We've gotten to the end of what we can do by simply throwing money at our problems. We have to become more sophisticated, and we have to ask a deeper set of questions and start to question some of the assumptions that have gone into our current approach. What are some of those assumptions? Americans have a cultural misunderstanding of how wealth is created within cities. This is the entire Curbside Chat program, which many of you have seen, but I want to even step back a little bit further and help you understand. Hurricane Katrina, fantastic for GDP growth and unemployment. The way we measure economic statistics in this country, Hurricane Katrina is a net positive. It put people to work, it created all kinds of spending, it created all kinds of investment. All of a sudden we needed temporary cottages, we needed to rebuild, we needed dikes built, we needed pumps, we needed all this stuff, right? Fantastic for GDP growth and unemployment. At the micro level, at the community level, at the neighborhood level, it was an absolute disaster. We wiped out people's wealth. While we got GDP growth, we wiped out wealth. When we go out today, in the name of growth and jobs, and build transportation infrastructure, we get all the usual suspects to show up, right? They show up, they make their investments, they have all the financing mechanisms in place to make it cash flow. They create jobs, they create growth. And when you look at the statistics that we measure for success, this all shows up as a net positive. But when we look at the community's wealth, it doesn't work out that way, it doesn't. The community's wealth is measured differently than our macro statistics are measured. We know that when we get these kind of investments in cities, we see a very predictable cycle. When we first build that interchange and we get all the new growth, all of a sudden we have all this new revenue coming in. Everything is brand new, it doesn't cost us anything, it's all wonderful. New growth gives us this illusion of wealth and prosperity. But when we get out a generation, and then we have to start maintaining and fixing things, we got to fill those potholes, we got to replace those pipes, we got to fix those sidewalks. All of a sudden, this wealth just starts to slowly disappear, right? And get sucked out of us. Cities compensate, of course, by doing what? By taking on debt. And you can see now in a city like Ferguson, where we just recently had this massive eruption unrest, you've got a city that's spending $800,000 a year on interest payments on their debt, while they spend $25,000 a year on sidewalk maintenance. You wind up in this pattern of development with enormous liabilities along with enormous debt. This is not building wealth. And my friend Joe Minicozy has showed us where the wealth is actually stored in our communities. This is Buffalo. Buffalo, one of the Rust Belt cities that's been hollowed out as part of this post-World War II experiment that we've been on. Of course, when you look at the value of Buffalo, you see, even with it hollowed out, all the stuff that we've built in this new style is not where the value is. The value remains in those core areas that we built at a different time, in a different place, in a different style, with a different set of values. We have to understand where the wealth is in our communities. It isn't where Americans think it is. The American transportation system has a bias built in towards building new stuff and away from maintaining the things that we have. Let me give you an example of this. Here in Minnesota, we have 1,149 structurally deficient bridges. The total cost to fix them is estimated at $500 million. It's a huge sum of money. A lot of infrastructure needs to be fixed. We had one bridge in Minnesota that was proposed over the St. Croix River, a river on the eastern side connected to Wisconsin. The cost to build this one bridge, $670 million. The 1,149 bridges carry 2.4 million cars a day. A lot of traffic travels over these structurally deficient bridges. The St. Croix Bridge, in turn, would carry 16,000 cars a day. Guess which one we did? Unless you think this was a big government program, liberally leads, just wasting our money, throwing it away at projects, this was championed by Michelle Bachmann, Tea Party leader in Congress, fiscal conservative, cut the budget, deficit hawk. This is her quote. Advocating for projects in one's district, in my mind, does not equate to in your mind. Right? The idea that we build new is so embedded in the way we fund projects, the way we incentivize certain behaviors, the way that our system, and remember, I'm going to go back to this, the efficient system we have is designed to operate, that even in the face of something this ridiculous, we really don't even have much public debate. We just build the new thing, even though we have all these huge needs for maintenance. The hierarchical road system manufactures congestion. We have built our entire road network today around this notion of a hierarchical road system. Again, insert graphic. Local roads empty into collector roads, empty into arterial roads, empty into major arterial roads. This is the basis on which we build transportation systems today. If we think about a river system, where creeks flow into brooks, flow into rivers, flow into major rivers, we kind of understand intuitively how this works, right? When we get rain out on the periphery, what happens? When we get lots of persistent rain, we get horrible flooding, right? We all kind of understand that when there's a lot of rain out here, when you get to the where everything funnels into, you're going to get flooding. So what do? We say things like, you're not allowed to fill in your wetlands. You're not allowed to run off all your farm irrigation. In certain areas you have to keep the trees because the trees will actually, collect the water and not allow it to flow. We do things here to prevent this because this is incredibly costly and destructive. Yet, when we take the river and make it a road, and we use the same exact logic and the same exact thinking, and we sprinkle the rain around out on the edges, we get a different kind of flooding, right? But it's the same essential concept. It's the same essential concept. This approach manufactures congestion. It is the programmed inevitable outcome of building with this hierarchical mindset. And even though we get a little bit of money when we do this stuff out on the edge, the enormous costs in terms of congestion and delays and reconstruction costs in this part is overwhelmingly massive. We have created a system that is designed to do exactly this, and it's nonsensical. Nonsensical to the point where you see, thank you Matthias, you see crazy things like this, where these two neighbors live back to back. Their houses are literally 50 feet apart. Yet, if one is going to drive to the other, that's a 7-mile ride by car. It would take you over 20 minutes to get there. Because of the way we funnel traffic and force it to go in unnatural ways. This is a system that has outlived its theoretical construct and needs to go away. We have a built-in assumption that traffic amounts continually increase. And if you step back and be sympathetic with the engineering profession for a second, you realize that congestion is this absolute killer. And you have a system that is designed to manufacture congestion. And so how do you respond to that? You respond to that by overestimating the amount of cars you're going to get systematically everywhere. And when we look at projections that are done, this one was done in Washington State. Here's a projection they did in '96. Here's one they did in 2002. Here's one they did in 2011 saying this is what traffic's going to do. Here's what traffic actually did. Right? We are incapable of doing anything but fearing the horrible congestion monster. When we get to the federal level, we start to aggregate all the states' projections. We see the same exact thing. This is repeated over and over and over again. We fear congestion so bad, we can't actually think of anything but ever-increasing congestion. And this, of course, causes us to do what? To massively overbuild, massively overdesign. We do this again and again and again, and we have to rethink the assumptions behind making that happen. When we build, we focus on peak efficiency, not on optimizing the system. When we have rush hour traffic, and we're going to go out and design a highway, we design it for that major arterial to handle all kinds of cars. Yet, we can look around, and if you were up at 30,000 feet looking down, you would see that the vast majority of our transportation infrastructure, the vast majority of our pavement is completely unused. Again, an optimization of the hierarchical road network that makes no practical sense. It would be as if we were running an airline, and we design our capacity for Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then we run our airline on, at half full or empty planes the rest of the year. This is a system that makes no sense. It's optimized for the peak as opposed to optimized for day in and day out types of use. We design for speed, not for travel time. We design for speed, not travel time. So we design for how fast you can go, not how long it's going to take you to get somewhere. This is an example I put together from downtown Kansas City. I was staying at a hotel, had to go out to the airport. On the way out, I had to pass through 10 traffic signals. You are allowed to go 30 miles an hour in the downtown. That's what it's designed for. And so when you sit down and look at it, if you didn't hit any traffic signals and could drive 30 miles an hour through the downtown, it would take you a minute 24 to get through town. But as soon as you start hitting traffic signals, the amount of time that it takes you to get through town goes way, way up. I actually hit 6 signals going through town, so it took about 7 minutes to get through. Let's say that instead of designing for 30 mile an hour speeds, we said we're going to slow all the cars down to 15 miles an hour. We're going to get rid of the traffic signals. We're going to have continuous flow intersections. We're just going to have everybody drive real slow and make their way through the city. How fast would you make it through that same area? Well, 2 minutes and 48 seconds. As soon as you hit more than one light, it is costing you more time to be able to drive 30 miles an hour than it is if everyone just drove slow. Yes, when the light turns green, you get to drive really fast to the next light. And then you get to sit there and wait. We have designed a system that costs everybody enormous amounts of time because we insist on high speeds, as opposed to a system of low speeds that gets you where you want to go much more quickly. Continuous flow intersections are not voodoo. They're used all over the world. They're very simple to navigate. They're very simple to understand. Americans have the ability to do this just like anybody else. Although, if you listen to my county commissioner, he said, being a good American that I am, and thinking we fought a war with Europe over some things, this is one of those things that seems to me to be European. Overlooking the fact that we didn't actually fight a war with Europe, you know. Most of them are our allies. Nonetheless, you know, we don't want none of that foreign stuff here. And then, you know, if that is a little bit too much for you, this will blow your minds. I haven't figured out how to do this with a pointer. You know, the idea that we maybe don't even need traffic circles. We don't even need this type of thing. We just need slow speeds and people being able to navigate space together. This works all over the world. We have a system reliant on traffic signals and high speeds. It is not a system that is designed to get you where you need to go quickly. I haven't quite figured out how to do that slide yet without, you know, slowing up the presentation. So, hang on.
I know where you're going to lose one now.
Yeah, that's cool. We've entrenched the highway building mentality within local government. Forgiving design. Forgiving design is a brilliant, brilliant concept. We realized early on that we were killing people with the highways we were building. And that we needed to understand drivers and understand that drivers were going to make mistakes. And when they made mistakes, we had to have a design that would forgive their errors. So if you look down to switch the radio and you drift a little bit, we don't want that to end up in a fatality because that's a frequent thing that happens, right? If you lose control and kind of go off the side, we want to be able to have you regain control before something tragic happens. And so what we did is we started to design with the natural mistakes that drivers make in mind. We would take a 2-lane normal highway and we'd say, okay, what we need to do is widen out the lanes, give people a little bit more room. We need to widen out the shoulders so that if they go off, they've got room to recover. And then we need to get rid of the obstacles out on the edge so that if they did have a tragic accident, they weren't going to hit something. Their momentum could burn out before they came to a tragic end by running into something, right? This is brilliant. This is really, really brilliant stuff. We have saved hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of lives building in this way on our highway system. The problem is when we get to our cities, it's a completely different deal. Because we all intuitively understand that when you widen out the roads, when you flatten the hills, when you make the curves smoother, what happens? people drive faster. And when they drive faster, with people and businesses and complexity, accidents happen, bad things happen. You get situations like this, where we literally have a highway designed through the middle of the neighborhood. And you have the local engineers saying, look, the neighborhood hates this because people are driving through so fast, please slow down, right? Everything about the design says drive fast, but the sign says slow down. We actually call this the sign of failure, right? Because you have failed to design a piece of transportation infrastructure to fit the neighborhood context and the speed you actually want people to drive. The sign of failure is actually a nicer thing than what some people do in these situations. Nonetheless, it doesn't work. On this exact same street, we actually went out and did a speed study. We went out and took 2 hours on a Thursday afternoon and recorded the speeds that people were driving. We went out a week later and in the early morning painted in chalk narrow lanes. There's no pavement markings there now. So we painted narrow lanes under the theory that we would slow people down. And in fact, that's exactly what happened. Here's the 30-mile-an-hour line. And you can see, we want people driving in the 20 to 25-mile-an-hour range, or even 15. In this case, you had a lot of people going way too fast. And as soon as we put the pavement markings in, it slowed people down considerably. We brought this to the city engineer, and of course, what was the reaction? Wow, so we could just go out and spend a couple $1,000s on paint and narrow the lanes and it would slow traffic down? No, it was, the design manual says we can't do that, and so I'm sorry, we're not going to go put those pavement markings in. We have embedded this thinking in our cities, and it doesn't belong there. This is something we call a strode. A strode is a
unholy hybrid between a street and a road.
It is the futon transportation. Yeah, thank you, everybody. It's a piece of infrastructure that's trying to do two things at once. It is trying to move traffic quickly while also providing a platform for value. It does neither of them well. The strode moves cars at speeds too slow to get around efficiently, but too fast to support productive private sector investment. The result is an expensive, dangerous highway with an unproductive tax base. This is the default setting for everything we build from a transportation standpoint in this country. It costs an incredibly lot. It returns very little on our investment, not nearly enough to justify maintaining it. And from a vehicle standpoint, it's dangerous. But from a human standpoint, it's incredibly dangerous because as soon as you start increasing speeds above a 20-mile-an-hour threshold, you're liable to start killing people in all this complexity that we put in these areas. The strode is the default option, and it needs to go away. We've induced local government as part of this whole process of efficiency and the way we're going to make this system work. We've induced local government to organize around the big project. It is, in many ways, easier to get $1 million than it is to get 10,000. And we all kind of have seen this and are aware of this. This is a project in my hometown. We took a little shortcut around the city and spent $9.2 million making it from a 2-lane to a 4-lane. We were able to get this money because the feeder process for that is there. We also had another proposal to spend around $17,000 doing some neighborhood improvements, like putting in bike lanes, adding crosswalks. Can't fund this. There's no money for that anywhere in the budget or anywhere to be had, right? This is all part of this silo and hierarchical system. At the federal level, we have created the NPOs. We've created this whole distribution network to funnel money down to the local level. It comes with all the strings. It comes with all the standards. We have reoriented our government to essentially be feeders and receivers of that. We have created the same silos in every city across this country. Cylinders of excellence. And so what you get out of this is you get these capital improvement plans, these wish lists of projects. Here's the 20 things that we want to do. Here's how much they're going to cost. Let's get them in the pipeline so that we can get them funded. And so council members come in wanting, to make changes and do the things differently, and they wind up the first act that they're in having to do with a project that was initiated 15 years ago and now has gone through the whole process and is finally funded. So in my city, I'll go back to the $9.2 million shortcut. There was an alternative that was put forth that would have cost $1.4 million, that would have kept the 2 lanes, which is what the neighborhood wanted, create a platform where we would have gotten more investment, improve the pedestrian flow back and forth between the neighborhood and the college that was on the other side. Which project would you have done? The city would have loved to have done the $1.4 million project. That was the one that made the most sense. Here's the problem. The local share of this project was $920,000, while the city would have had to pay the entire cost for this one. Your engineers have been working on this one for a decade. You've had all the public hearings, they've had all the design stuff, they've gotten the legislators to fund it, they've gotten all the political process to line up behind it. Are you going to vote no to this and actually make your city spend more money to do something else? No, you're not going to do it. This is the dysfunctional result of the system we've created. Now, we make the pill go down a little bit easier for these local politicians, right? We give them the ribbon cutting, we give them the front page article in the newspaper. This is what we do. This is a byproduct of some incorrect assumptions that we use in our system. It's important to know that our private businesses have adapted to exploit the system that we've created. A lot of times we look and we say, we have this market-based economy. But what we really have is an economy that is adapted to the spending that we do on the government side. All of these guys have business models that are dramatically different 60, 70 years ago. These guys all existed in the marketplace before the Interstate Highway Act, right? We had coffee shops, we had gas stations, we had retailers, we had all this stuff. It's different now today, right? And these guys lobby. These guys are there at the trough directing all this stuff will go. This is the amount of money they all spent on lobbying over the last decade. Walmart, McDonald's, Starbucks, Shell Oil. And just step back and think for a second. When did it become sensical to design all of our local streets to handle a semi-tractor and trailer, right? If you go talk to engineers and talk about narrowing streets and changing curb radiuses, what do they always throw at you? Well, when a tractor trailer comes through, it's not going to be able to make that corner. Who cares? Why are we spending our wealth to ensure that oversized trucks can make small deliveries in neighborhoods and not have to stop and redistribute to smaller trucks to actually get to places? Other places around the world handle this much, much differently. Our public safety departments have institutionalized their approach within the current paradigm. The second you go and say, this street is too wide, we need to narrow it down, save ourselves some money, make it a better place, increase the private sector investment, all the good things that we want to do, who steps up to the plate to oppose that? This guy, right? This guy says, if I can't drive at high speeds to the fire, be able to whip a big circle and come back, people are going to die. It's going to be children that die. It's going to be your kid. You're not going to want that on your conscience. We can't change this, right? And you get pictures like this that are kind of manufactured to show, look it. There's no way we can narrow the streets because it is never going to work, right? People are going to die. There's going to be a calamity. The thought behind that, or the assumption behind that insight, is that fire trucks only come in one size. But of course, if we just think about it for a second, we understand that there are many, many different sizes of firefighting equipment. They don't have problems in Europe or in other areas where they have tight corners actually fighting fires. They've found a way to adapt. They've found a way to actually figure this out. The question that we have to ask is, do we build our city for the equipment we want? Or do we choose the equipment for the city we want? Today, we do the former. We need to start doing the latter because it's vastly less expensive to buy a smaller fire truck and keep a less expensive street than to spend all your wealth widening out everything to be able to accommodate a really wide, expensive fire truck. Beyond that, we have to ask some simple questions. Where are you more likely to die from a fire? On the left here is Switzerland. In Switzerland, they pack them in like sardines, right? High density, narrow streets, people living real close to each other. This is, if you went to the average fire marshal in the U.S. and said, we want to build this, they would be apoplectic, right? There's no way, because people are going to die. This is the way we build here in America. Nice wide lanes, you're able to get out there quickly if there's an emergency. If one house catches on fire, it's not going to take out the whole neighborhood and kill a whole bunch of people. This has got to be really safe, right? You are 6 times more likely to die by fire in the United States than you are in Switzerland. In fact, if you look at it, here's Switzerland, here's the United States. We're not even close, right? Why is that? It's because they focus on prevention while we focus on suppression. Sure, your house might catch on fire. We'll get there as quickly as we can. Let's focus on how quickly we can get there. As opposed to, what are some of the simple, rudimentary things we can do to make sure that your house doesn't catch on fire? It's a lot cheaper, it's a lot more effective, and it actually saves lives. And the side effect of our approach is that we have horrendous auto deaths because, of course, these wide strode environments induce people to drive very fast in complex environments and create a lot of casualties. We are, in terms of road fatalities, down by Serbia and Korea, even though we spend dramatically more on road safety. This leads us to the tragic irony of the entire situation, which is that our wide streets allow us to quickly respond to the collisions that are caused by our wide streets. These are assumptions that need to be challenged and need to go away. We discount alternatives to driving, or we treat them with the highway mindset. Walking. It is beyond me why every city wouldn't have the most aggressive pedestrian-oriented policies possible. It costs you nothing. You have to pay nothing for parking. You make all kinds of money from people actually walking. It is the highest return investment. Yet we can look again and again and again at the places where people actually are walking and the infrastructure is not there. It's despotic, it doesn't exist, it forces people into their cars. Yet we have the money to do it, and we understand that it needs to be done because when we build other places, we say, oh no, you've got to have it, right? And if this seems crazy, take a look at this one. This is a roundabout in Wisconsin off of a highway interchange where we have built this amazing pedestrian infrastructure to be able to get you around this roundabout. But you can see where the sidewalks end here. You can actually go to this gas station, get out, walk around here. But this is what it looks like from, the top. We've spent 6 figures on pedestrian infrastructure here, yet nobody will ever walk in this place at all. When we talk about a system that is efficient, that loses its local nuance when it gets down the ground level, this is what we're talking about. We have the money. We need to invest in pedestrians. It is a high return investment. We're wasting our money on places where it doesn't matter. And of course, the fact that we locate all this stuff out where people can't get to and can't walk is an entirely another level of insanity that we've created in the system. Biking. It's the lowest cost, highest returning investment we can make in our cities. Yet we still, for the most part of this country, look at biking as recreation, not as transportation. We force bikes, the idea of shifting to a mindset that considers biking as transportation is so simple. Things like bike racks and not having arcane laws apply to bikes that don't apply to other parts of society. Literally, we have the chance to, by spending very little bit of money, completely transform the way our cities interact. The return on these investments are enormous. When we get to buses, again, they have forever been second class in our society. That needs to change because of the immense flexibility. And when we design these systems, we design them as highway engineers think, right? That everybody needs to park somewhere, get out of their car, and then get into mass transit. Mass transit can't be something that is the beginning and the end of the trip. The beginning of the trip, the end of the trip is always going to be the automobile. And if you look at just the Twin Cities metropolitan area, where we're investing in transit infrastructure and where our wealth and our people are at, are 2 dramatically different places. A shifting of our priorities, a shifting of our wealth to a different emphasis would have enormously high returns and provide great transit to a ton of people. We don't use legitimate math to make our investment decisions. Right now, we have a system that equates time with money. And it makes some sense because we all equate time with money too, right? You go to work, you get paid for your time, we get that. But when we look at this from a highway perspective, here's what the DOTs do. They say, you know what, we're going to increase everybody's drive time, we're going to lower it by 30 seconds. There's 40,000 cars that go through here on an average day, so by saving them all 30 seconds, we'll take 30 seconds times 40,000 times $20 an hour that you make at your work, times 365 days a year, times 50 years, and we come up with billions and billions of dollars that we save by saving you all 30 seconds on your commute. Of course, does saving you 30 seconds change your life in any material way? No. Can we pay for these projects and save time? No. We have to actually take your cash to pay for the project to allow you to save these 30 seconds. This is the math that is embedded in all of the transportation investments that we make. Let me give you kind of an extreme example, although extreme only because the numbers are huge, not because of the thinking. This is Highway 91 in California. They're about to spend $1.1 billion adding capacity to this. The project will give relief to drivers in the regular lanes, raising their average rush hour speeds from 8 miles an hour to 9.4 miles an hour. No one's life is materially better because they can travel at 9.4 miles an hour instead of 8. Yet we are spending over $1 billion to make that happen. These are ridiculous, ridiculous investments. And you know that this math is all fraud because when we do the reverse, when we actually go out and put in a signal or put in something that slows down traffic or makes it stop, we don't do the opposite. We don't go to Walmart and McDonald's and say, you know what, we're putting in that signal, that's going to slow these 40,000 cars down 30 seconds each, and so you owe us $2 billion in order to put that signal in. We never use that math at all, right? It's math of growth, not math of operating the system. And then finally, nobody's keeping score. And it is important to understand this, that we have built a transportation system where nobody is keeping score. The American Society of Civil Engineers came out with a report a couple of years ago that said between the next decade, between now and 2020, if we don't spend a proper amount of money on transportation infrastructure, our families and our businesses are going to suffer a loss of $1 trillion. Most of that loss is in lost time spent in congestion, but they estimated that as having a value of $1 trillion. In order to avoid that $1 trillion loss, we need to spend $2.2 trillion. The same report said that between now and 2040, if we fail to make the proper transportation investments, our economy is not going to grow as fast as it otherwise would. And the federal budget is going to lose about $540 billion of revenue. In order to avoid that $540 billion loss, we need to spend $6.6 trillion on transportation infrastructure. Yes, that is insane. And that is the byproduct of a system that has had no feedback for a long, long time. A system that has grown out of control. A system that has no positive loop telling it that what it's doing is absolutely insane. So the question, do we need more money, really is more, do we need an entirely different system? Do we need an entirely different mindset? If we're going to build the next American city, do we need to think dramatically differently about the way we make transportation investments? We've run out of money. It's time to start thinking. Let's talk about what this looks like. And I want to preface this, what this looks like, with this insight. In the next American city, local leaders must lead. They cannot be followers. Let me say that again. Local leaders must lead. As a local leader in the next American city, you're not going to be able to just plug in to Washington, D.C. and download prosperity. You are not going to be able to plug into the state capitol and download prosperity. Those places have enormous problems. We have to do things for ourselves. We have to make tough decisions here for us. Our local leaders need to be thoughtful. They need to lead. This is going to take a mind shift. And I want to walk you through what this transformation is. Because we're really looking at what was a post-depression mindset versus a post-Great Recession mindset? They are dramatically different. We are in a very different time. So after the Great Depression, responding to the industrial city, the Great Depression, all of that, our emphasis was on growth. No longer. We need to be talking about productivity. How do we take the investments we've made and get more out of them? How do we improve the return on investment for all the investments that we've already made? How do we make the highest returning investments we can? Instead of efficiency and making sure that everything operates on a standard, efficient process, we actually have to start talking about resilience. Resilience means you give up some efficiency to have some redundancy. You buy yourself some insurance by having backup systems, having different approaches. We're going from top down to bottom up. We live in the age of the internet. We all kind of intuitively understand that a highly connected economy functioning from the bottom up is a very chaotic but smart way. Our governments have not adapted to this yet. Local leaders need to get them that. We're switching from a mindset of measuring success based on quantity to measuring success based on quality. That means an entirely different metric system on how we measure success. There is no success today, or there is no metric today for great third places, right? There is no metric today for a high quality of life. We have all the metrics for high standard of living. We can count how many TVs you have, how many cars you have, what the GDP growth is. We need an entirely new set of localized metrics dealing with quality. We're going from a post-depression notion that we could accomplish a lot with standardization to the need to inject local nuance and customization. Yes, our highways may always be standardized, but our local streets need to all be different. Need to be adapted, need to be designed individually and scaled to that place. The buildings need to interact with them. We need to create all this local nuance that we've simply lost in this process. And just philosophically, in a large sense, we are going from an America that is great because of its brawn to an America that will be great because of its brains. Here's what a next American city approach looks like. The first thing we need to do, local leaders, identify your roads. Take steps to make them high-speed, high-capacity connections. What is a road? A road starts with a place and it ends with a place. And it provides a connection between the two. If you think of a road as a replacement of a railroad is a road on rails. Started in one spot, got off on another spot. There weren't frontage railroads, there weren't drive-through railroads. High-speed connection between two places. This is what a road is. And the reason why it's important to understand this is that there's all kinds of things we can do with this once we have this identified. If traffic increases, we can increase the capacity of the road. That's a very simple thing to do. If we don't have the room to increase the capacity of that road, or if we want to provide other alternatives, which I think is a very smart thing to do as these places grow and mature, we can do that. We can scale this up. These are road systems that are incredibly scalable and flexible in that framework, as long as we're connecting a productive place with another productive place and not mucking it up with stuff in between. Here's some tips for building quality roads. Clearly identify the places the road connects. You have to understand where you're trying to connect with the road. Reduce and ultimately eliminate all turning traffic. When you have turning traffic on a road, especially left crossovers, this kind of stuff adds complexity that slows down your road and makes it less productive. Privilege through traffic to the extreme at any junctions. So if you've got to have a signal on your road for whatever reason, right now we do 90-second to 3-minute wait times on highways. I think that should go from 5 minutes to 10 minutes to even 15-minute wait times on roads where we have through traffic. Use transit as an alternative to roadway expansion. When we're connecting two productive places where people can start out in a place and end in a place, we can make their trips very efficient with transit when they don't have to have a car as an intermediary. Note, we're starting to get into the point where I haven't added all the graphics, so it's going to become a little bit more disjointed. We need to identify our streets. So we've identified our roads, we need to look and identify our streets. And we need to take steps to make them financially productive places. Our streets are our places where we're trying to build wealth and value within our community. When we do that, we intuitively understand the values that need to apply to building great streets. When we're building great roads, really great connections between places, engineers totally get how to do this, right? Engineers start with the design speed of that road. They look and say, what's the volume of traffic I need to handle? They then say, given those two variables, what does the manual say is a safe roadway? And what's the cost to build that? These are the engineer's values. They apply wonderfully to roads. When we're looking at local streets, however, and we want to build streets that are productive, wealth-creating machines, we have to provide a different set of values. We have to actually design for society's values. What are those values? Let me ask you this. On your local streets, and the streets right out here, the streets in your neighborhoods, the places where you live, of these four, which one is your highest priority? Is it making sure the traffic can move quickly, making sure we move a high volume of traffic, making sure it's a safe place, or making sure it's cost effective? Is it speed, volume, safety, or cost?
Safety.
Of the remaining three, do you want to make sure that we move cars quickly, we move a high volume of cars, or it's cost effective? Speed, volume, or cost? Is it more important to you to move a high volume of cars or high speed? Volume or speed? Do you see what we did here? This is a mentality of a road. This is a mentality of a street. We need to insist that a different mentality apply when we're building great productive streets. We know what that is, right? I've gone around the country and done this with audiences of hundreds of people. They all shout out the same exact thing. This is not a mystery. I'm not taking a big leap of faith. I can't change this slide on the fly, right? We know what this is. Let's insist on it. We need to stop using forgiving design. In the engineer mentality, these people are obstacles in the clear zone next to the recovery area, right? In a strong towns next to American City, these are people, shoppers, and our neighbors. There's nothing wrong with making that shift and demanding that change in mentality. We need to design streets for neighborhood speeds. The kind of crazy thing about forgiving design is that as engineers, we've actually gotten into human psychology, and we understand that humans do things in certain ways. And so in highways, we design them to compensate for that. We have the capacity as engineers, and we certainly have the capacity as lay people, to demand that we take people into consideration when we design these places. We should have forgiving design. We should forgive the kid who runs after the ball out into the street. We should forgive the biker who, turns around the car. We should forgive the person who backs out of their driveway. The way we do forgiving design in streets is to forgive and understand the complexity that is inherent there. If you have police out on your streets giving speeding tickets in the same place over and over and over again, the feedback that you should be getting is that the design is wrong, not that the police budget is too low, right? We need to flatten the hierarchical road network. Yeah, this is where my graphics all go to heck, because Edward interrupted me this morning. I'll blame you. The hierarchical road network manufactures congestion. Once we get into a city, there's no need for it. It just goes away. Get rid of it. There's no need for the hierarchical road network. It is a false construct that we have put on cities. We need to mature our response to congestion. Right now, we spend billions a year fighting congestion in a very immature way. We need to mature our response. On roads, we increase capacity. I get that. And transit needs to become a very viable option for connecting two places on a high-quality road. But when we get into our cities, when we get on our streets, the proper response to congestion is not to add capacity. It's to intensify our land use. It's the Yogi Berra thing. No one wants to go there, because the place is too crowded, right? If people are there, they want to be there. Make room for them. Make room for them. Mature your land use. Congestion is in our cities. Congestion is not the enemy. It's the solution. It's the thing that drives investment. If people want to be there, allow them to invest and mature the place and respond to that congestion with private sector investment instead of public sector devolution and disinvestment. We need to provide alternatives. And I think this is the saying that maybe is like the whole takeaway from this presentation. Today we have a transportation system focused on maximizing the amount you can travel. We need a transportation system that minimizes the amount you have to travel. As Americans, we love choice. Right? As Americans, we equate choice with freedom. We equate freedom with the ability to go anywhere, do anything we want to do, whenever we want to do it. I think that that is fantastic. I buy into that. I buy into that. The thing is that today, we don't have a freedom, right? Because for most of us, it is not a choice of having to get into the car to go somewhere. We don't have a choice to do something differently. If you want groceries, you have to get in your car and go to the grocery store. And it is not walkable. It is not near you. You do not have a choice to fight. You do not have a choice to walk. We have been focused for so long on the idea that by increasing the amount we could be mobile, by increasing the mobility of our population through the automobile, that we would increase prosperity. The way we're going to increase prosperity in the next American city is to give people lots of options. We have a focus on eliminating stroads. At this point, you've identified your streets, you've identified your roads. There's only two things left. One is your stroads, and one is your stuff that you're going to get rid of. So when we eliminate our stroads, what that means is doing one of two things. You're going to look at this corridor and you're going to say, this is going to evolve over the next generation of my city to be either a street or a road. If it's going to become a street, you have to change your land use, you have to bring things up, you have to slow down the traffic, you have to inject street type of thinking into that corridor. If it's going to become a road, you do the opposite. You close the accesses, you provide alternative routes, you get things off of that corridor so that you can get that traffic moving very quickly. You've identified the streets, you've identified the roads, you've identified your stroads. What you've got left is something that we call these low productivity segments. Think dead-end cul-de-sac. Right? Your dead-end cul-de-sac is never going to be a platform for creating value. It's never going to be a road. What do we do with dead-end cul-de-sacs and segments like that? We privatize them. We give them back to people. And I would propose this bargain. Hey, if you want the public to maintain your dead-end cul-de-sac, we will do that with two conditions. One, you allow it to connect through to something else. So we connect connectivity through your neighborhood. Two, you allow by right the next increment of intensity in land use. So if you're in a neighborhood of single-family homes, by right, you get to do duplexes, you get to do carriage houses, you get to do accessory apartments by right. No public hearings, no NIMBYs, none of that, by right. If you don't want to agree to those two things, that's okay. Here's your dead-end cul-de-sac. It's now yours to maintain. In a savvy city, that is a fair trade. Because right now, what we're doing is we're taking the wealth of the rest of the community, appropriating it for that street. That's not a smart city thing to do. Finally, and I think this is the last one, we need to say no to the poison pill. Every city in this country has a list of projects that they're working on, long-term undertakings that have been in the works for 5 years, 10 years, sometimes 20 years. They're working with their legislators, they're working with the funding sources, they're trying to bring all of this to bear. And it's this inertia, this momentum that keeps going on. When we did the shovel-ready projects back in the the stimulus bill, to me, this was like the nightmare of all nightmares. Because what were the stimulus projects? They were all the crappy projects on your list that you couldn't get funding for before because they weren't worthy. And you weren't going to fund them locally because they weren't worthy. Well, all of a sudden we rained money down at everybody, and everybody dusted off their crappy, worthless project and said, now we're ready to go, right? It's the one that the bureaucracy put forward that the politicians just couldn't stomach. This is the poison pill. And our leaders at the local level have to stop this process. Have to be able to say, you know what? Let's work with our legislator to, instead of getting $7 million to build the 4-lane road around the city, let's get $700,000 to invest in our neighborhoods. That would be like way better money spent, right? We need to stop this process today, understand that it's there, and start redirecting it now so that we don't get stuck with that bad decision at the end. Oh, adopt a public safety approach that serves the city, not the other way around. This is the notion that instead of building the city for the equipment we want, we buy the equipment for the city we want. Secret Service. Do you think the president goes to the Secret Service and says, can I make this speech in this city at this time? No. What does the president do? The president goes to the Secret Service and says, I am making a speech in this city at this time, keep me safe. Right? That's the interplay. Today, we go to our firefighters and our police officers and say, may we close this street? And what do they say? Oh, you know, that might not be safe. We have to have throughfare here. You can't do that. Public safety, da da da. What we need to do is we need to go to them and say, we are closing this street. What are you going to do to keep it safe? We can do this. There are intelligent ways to respond to this. If the president can do it, our cities can do it. And finally, Joe, we need to do the math, all right? Local leaders must lead. They cannot be followers. In the next American city, it's going to be all about the places with local leaders adapting to the new world. We have the resources in our community. We have the wealth. We just need to deploy them differently. Thank you.